All right, so picture this. You're at a restaurant, menu's looking all fancy, right? And boom, gluten-free this, gluten-free that. It's like they think even the air we breathe needs to be gluten-free these days.
Right. It's everywhere.
Seriously. We kind of chuckle about it. It's a whole trend and all. And hey, good for those who choose that route. But, and this is important, it's easy to forget that for some people, gluten-free isn't some trendy diet.
It's definitely not.
It's about managing a serious condition.
Absolutely. We're talking celiac disease.
And that, my friends, goes way beyond ditching the bread basket. So let's bring in the expert voice today, someone who can really break down the science and realities of celiac disease. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So glad to have you. Now, for those who might be thinking, celiac, gluten, isn't it all kind of the same, a bit of tummy trouble? Help us understand why celiac is in a league of its own.
You're right. There can be confusion. While some folks might feel a little off after a bagel, celiac disease is different. We're talking about a full-on autoimmune condition. Basically, your immune system, your body's defense crew, goes a little haywire when gluten enters the scene.
Oh, interesting. So it's like it mistakes something in gluten as a threat, like a foreign invader.
Exactly. It's like it sees the lining of your small intestine, that part that helps you absorb nutrients, and it's like, enemy alert, got attack.
Oh, wow. So it's literally an inside job gone wrong. So this is a very different response than, say, someone with a peanut allergy where it's more immediate.
Absolutely. Celiac is about long-term damage to the digestive system. We're not just talking discomfort here, but an actual impact on how your body takes in nutrients. And get this, 1%, that's 1 in every 100 people globally potentially have celiac disease.
1%. That's a lot of people dealing with this. And I bet many don't even know it.
You got it. Many go undiagnosed, unaware of why they might be experiencing certain symptoms.
Wow. Okay. Before we get into those symptoms, let's back up to the culprit here, gluten. What is it exactly? Break it down for us.
So gluten, it's a family of proteins.
Proteins. Okay. Never would guess that.
Right. And you find these proteins in grains, mainly wheat, barley, and rye. Think of it like this. Gluten gives bread that chewy texture, helps dough rise. It's like the backbone of most baked goodies. Now, for most people, no problem. Their bodies digest it fine. But for someone with celiac disease, certain proteins within gluten, mainly gliadin and glutenin, those are the troublemakers.
Gliadin, glutenin. Sounds like a law firm, honestly.
Yeah.
But seriously, those specific proteins are where things go wrong for folks with celiac. Now, you mentioned bread, but it's not just about bread, right?
You're right. Gluten's sneaky. Sauces, dressings, even some medications use gluten as a binding agent.
Wait, seriously, medications. Talk about hidden dangers.
It's true. So it's really about knowing what to look for. It's like those proteins are masters of disguise.
So let's paint a picture for our listeners. Someone with celiac, they unknowingly ingest gluten. What's happening inside their body at that moment?
Imagine your small intestine, right? It has these tiny little finger-like projections called villi.
Villi.
Yeah, like tiny little fingers lining your intestine.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And these villi, they're crucial for grabbing onto nutrients from your food and sending them into your bloodstream.
Makes sense. They're like little nutrient grabbers.
Exactly. But when someone with celiac disease consumes gluten, their immune system, it's like it gets confused and sees these proteins as a threat. So what does it do? It attacks those villi.
No, not the villi. So instead of being nice and long and grabby, the gluten flattens them.
Exactly. That immune response causes inflammation, damages those villi, and suddenly they can't do their job properly.
And that's where those classic celiac symptoms we hear about come into play, right? We're talking about like chronic diarrhea, unexplained weight loss, fatigue, that sort of thing.
You got it. Those are some of the more well-known symptoms, and they can be incredibly disruptive on their own, but it can go way beyond that.
Really? How so?
Well, we're talking potential vitamin deficiencies, anemia, even issues with bone health down the line because of poor calcium absorption, all because those villi aren't doing their job properly.
Wow, that's a domino effect.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the havoc gluten wreaks, but how does someone even know they have celiac disease? It's not as simple as saying, hey, bread makes my stomach hurt.
What? It can be tricky. Celiac often likes to play hide and seek, mimicking symptoms of other conditions.
So sneaky. All right, so then walk us through this. Someone's concerned they might have celiac. How do they actually get diagnosed?
Usually starts with a blood test.
Okay.
Doctors are looking for specific antibodies. These antibodies basically wave a little flag saying, the immune system is saying something it doesn't like.
Little red flags in the blood. Got it.
Exactly. If the blood tests show something suspicious, that's usually when a biopsy of the small intestine comes into play. It's the gold standard for confirming celiac.
Okay, so blood test first, then potentially a biopsy. And for those unfamiliar, we're talking about a small tissue sample, right, to examine under a microscope.
You got it. That's it.
Okay. So let's say someone gets that diagnosis, celiac disease confirmed. It's like, okay, no more gluten, got to make some changes. But how do you even begin to navigate that? I mean, these days, everything seems to have gluten-free slapped on the label.
It can feel overwhelming for sure.
Right.
And it's really important to remember, with celiac disease, we're not talking about a trendy diet. It's a lifelong commitment to avoiding gluten.
Because even a little crumb can set off that whole immune system chain reaction, right?
Exactly. But hey, here's the good news. There are tons of naturally gluten-free foods out there. Think fruits, veggies, lean protein like your fish, your chicken, all that good stuff. Beans, lentils.
So it's like going back to basics, focusing on whole foods.
Totally. And let's not forget those naturally gluten-free grains. We're talking quinoa, rice, corn. These are your friends.
Right, quinoa, that magical seed that thinks it's a grain.
Exactly. Reading those labels is super important. And yeah, it can be a bit of a learning curve, but honestly, once you get into the swing of it, it becomes second nature. Think of it like, I don't know, learning a new language, the language of gluten-free living.
I love that. Learning a new language. All right, so we've got our naturally gluten-free staples down, but what about those comfort foods? You know, bread, pasta, all that baked goodness. Are those totally off limits now?
Not at all. The great thing is there's this whole world of gluten-free alternatives out there. You've got bread made with almond flour, coconut flour, even chickpea flour.
Oh, wow, I've seen that at the store.
And it's the same with pasta. Rice noodles, quinoa pasta, lentil pasta, there are options galore.
So much variety. So it's less about deprivation and more about like getting adventurous in the kitchen, right?
100%. And honestly, there are so many great resources out there. Online communities, cookbooks, all dedicated to making gluten-free living super delicious and satisfying. You don't have to miss out.
That's what we like to hear. Now, for those who are new to this whole gluten-free world, I imagine avoiding cross-contamination at home is a big deal. Is it really as intense as they say?
It's definitely important. You're right about that. Gluten's a bit, well, think of it like glitter.
Oh no, don't even get me started on glitter. It gets everywhere.
Exactly. It's a good analogy. So yeah, having separate cutting boards, utensils, even appliances for a gluten-free prep can make a big difference.
A dedicated gluten-free zone. I like it.
It minimizes the risk of any accidental crumb-tastrophes, you know?
Crumb-tastrophes. Okay, that is gold. Feeling that one. All right, so listeners are taking notes. I can feel it. Now, for the question that's probably on everyone's mind, what does the future hold? Is there any hope for a cure down the line? Or are we talking about managing this long term?
It's the million-dollar question, right?
Oh.
And as of now, there's no magic cure for celiac, but there is some really promising research happening that gives us a lot of hope for the future.
Okay, all right, hit us with it. What are scientists cooking up in those labs? Give us the scoop.
So one really exciting area is enzyme therapy.
Enzyme therapy.
Yeah, imagine this. You basically give the body a little extra help in breaking down gluten.
Oh, right.
And these enzymes, they basically act like little ninjas, disarming the gluten before it can cause any trouble.
Hold on. So we're talking about giving the body superpowers to fight gluten.
The-
This is getting good. Tell me more.
That's the idea. Still early stages, though. You know, research takes time.
Of course. Makes sense. But enzyme therapy, I'm filing that one away. Okay, anything else on the horizon that has you like hopeful for the future of celiac treatment?
Oh, absolutely. Immune modulation. It's a whole other avenue.
Immune modulation. Okay, that sounds intense. What's the deal with that?
So picture this. Instead of just, going after the gluten directly, imagine if we could teach the immune system to just chill out when it sees gluten.
Wait, so like retraining the body's defense system to not freak out over gluten.
Exactly. Like, hey, immune system, this gluten thing, not a threat. Stand down.
That's wild. But hey, I'm all for less battle, more peace treaty, especially when it comes to our insides. Though retraining the immune system, that has to be crazy complex, right?
Oh, it's definitely a tougher nut to crack. But if we could achieve long-term tolerance, that'd be a game changer, And that's what makes all this research so exciting.
Yeah.
The possibilities are huge.
It's amazing to think, even just a few years ago, we didn't know half of this stuff.
It's true. Science is constantly evolving, and it's really incredible to see what we're learning about how everything works at, like, the tiniest level.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
The sneaky ways of gluten, how celiac is diagnosed, all that exciting research happening as we speak. But before we wrap up, gotta ask, you know me, always one more question. And this one's a bit more, I don't know, philosophical, I guess.
Go for it, game.
All right, so we've talked about how celiac is all about the body mistakenly seeing gluten as this big bad wolf, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what if, and here's me thinking out loud, what if it's not just us? What if gluten itself has changed over time? Think about it. The wheat we eat today is not our ancestors' wheat.
Wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it. And you know what? It's something researchers are looking into. There are actually theories that modern wheat, after all the hybridization and whatnot, it might actually be different at a molecular level.
So it's not us, it's the wheat that's changed. Whoa.
Exactly. Like it's possible all these changes have made gluten just harder for our bodies to handle. And then there's the whole hygiene hypothesis. Have you heard of
The
the
hygiene hypothesis. No, but it sounds intriguing. Lay it on me.
So basically, it suggests that because we're living in like these super sanitized environments these days, compared to like 100 years ago, it could actually be messing with our immune systems.
Okay, so we're too clean now. That's wild.
Right. It's kind of ironic. But basically, the idea is that because we're exposed to fewer microbes when we're kids, our immune systems might not develop the same tolerance they used to.
Huh. So our immune systems need a bit of dirt to learn what's up.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Right. It really makes you think our relationship with food, with the environment, even our own bodies, it's always changing, always evolving. And honestly, the more we learn, the more we realize how much we still don't know. But asking those questions, that's where the magic happens.
Food for thought, literally. Okay, so much Tantaroga. As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of celiac disease, what's the one key message you want our listeners to walk away with today?
If you remember nothing else, remember this. Knowledge is power. Whether you're living with celiac, you know someone who is, or you just want to understand it better, learning about it matters. It's about empathy, breaking down those misconceptions, and empowering everyone to live their best lives, gluten or no gluten.
Love that.
There.
Perfectly said. And on that note, listeners, I'll leave you with this. Next time you see that gluten-free label or someone mentions it in passing, take a second. Go beyond that buzzword. Think about the millions around the world who navigate the real deal, the ins and outs of celiac disease every single day, because understanding, that's where real change starts.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been truly eye-opening. Listeners, we're curious. What are your thoughts? Hit us up on social media, share your stories, your questions. And as always, keep those brains curious and keep asking questions.